Hey, what's going on? Welcome to Cleave to Antiquity. My name is Ben, and today I'm joined by a special guest, Rachel Wilson. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. I checked out the article. We were talking about the article that you had published when Jay was on the show, and we were talking about CIA subversion of the EP. So I figured this would be a kind of an interesting segue within the same vein. So I'm really excited to have you on the show to talk about some of these subjects as far as subversion goes, especially within the Orthodox Church. We can kind of branch off into some Roman Catholic stuff and the Protestant church and so on and so forth. Protestant churches, I
Sure.
guess. But I mean, everybody should be aware of who you are. But for those that aren't, you want to just
Mhm.
kind of introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'm Rachel Wilson. A lot of people know me as Andrew Wilson's wife, or like a friend of Jay Dyer. I've done a bunch of streams with Jay, with Dr. David Patrick Harry, with Jamie Hanshaw, and other various Orthodox folks, and all kinds of other people too, really. But yeah, I'm glad that this article is kind of popping up again and again because I think it's an evergreen piece that I wrote. At the time I wrote it, it was out of frustration because this was 2022 and various subversives in the Orthodox world were trying to uh, smear a good friend of mine, Abbot Trifon, who is the most wonderful man. If you've ever met him in person, if there's a human that radiates the love of Christ, it would be him. He is the kindest, warmest, most wonderful man. And they were trying to paint him as some kind of right wing violent extremist because at Montanica, we took a little tour of the old speakeasies there in Butte. And they have like in one of the speakeasies, they have props like, the old 1920s gangster machine guns from the Prohibition era. And they tell you to pose with it for like a picture with your friends of
Right.
the tour. And so that's what we did. And Sarah Riccardi Schwartz wrote a whole article trying to paint him specifically and everybody else who was there as these like violent right-wing extremists. And it was so absurd. And I knew that she knew that this was a photo op from a tour, right? I knew that she knew that, but she didn't care. She was going to take the opportunity anyway. So I wrote the article out of frustration to debunk that, but I had to get into how these subversives, where do they come from? Why are they doing it? How do they do it? How do they get popular? How do they get influence? So I had to get into some of the history. And I think that's relevant to so much of what's going on today. You've even heard Donald Trump talking about NGOs and maybe
Right.
defunding a lot of these or getting rid of them. So, so glad that you wanted to talk about this one because I think it's an important topic.
Yep, absolutely. There is a ton of subversion that is really pushed by these big foundations. They're really funded by these big foundations, and you just track the money and the ties that the foundations have, and it helps to paint a broader picture of maybe some of the agendas that you see them pushing. It's not just a case of like my friend Richard Redeem Zoomer. He's like, we're going to take back the main lines. I'm like, yeah, not until you trace the money and get rid of the corruption at the top. You know what I mean? Like you have to cut off some of these things. So it's good to be able to speak about it. So I was really interested. I kind of want to pull up the article here and
Sure.
just and work through it if that's okay. So let me see if I
Yeah.
can go ahead and pull this up. So I thought this was some key information to go over. So in the previous stream, we were talking about me and Jay we were talking about corruption within the ecumenical patriarchate and some of their CIA ties. What's interesting about some of the organizations that you name, we see some of the same actors here. So this is the Substack article here. I'm going to go ahead and share it. So how big foundation money is subverting traditional Christianity, and you start off by talking about Trifon and patristic faith. But let's talk about some of the actors that you were discussing in this article.
Yeah, so I kind of opened by talking about this struggle that's going on in Christianity between those of us who want to, retain the traditional moral and social teachings, even aside from the theology, right? We love theology nerds. I love theology nerds, but for like the vast majority of Christians out there, they're not like getting into the first few centuries in theology and reading the really deep stuff. It's more of a bit of a social battle because you've got these really progressive Christians and the progressive churches that are like we need to embrace LGBT, we need lesbian bishops, we need to come into the 21st century and modernize the church so everyone's welcome, because they have this vision of hippie Jesus, and that he was this guy that just came to love everyone and tell everybody that they're perfect the way they are, that they don't need to change anything. And that so all of these things are permissible. You can have a gay throuple and adopt children and be a Methodist pastor, right?
Right.
This is great and it's fine. And then you have those of us on the other end who say, absolutely not. This is not the traditional teaching of the church. We teach forgiveness and mercy, of course, but we also teach repentance, and we also teach humility and these other things. And no, not all behavior is acceptable. And we're not saying this to be mean or out of hate, but because we do care about people's salvation. And by telling them they're perfect the way they are and that they have nothing to repent for, you are literally putting a giant stumbling block in the way of the salvation of so many people. So
Mhm.
there's this huge argument. There's this big battle, and America's at the center of it. So I had to get a little bit into the Protestant churches and the Reformation, and how this really started right there, and it immediately became, I mean, this is not a new thing, really. And if you've read my book or a lot of my other writing, I talk a lot about this, about how right away with the Protestant Revolution, um, they immediately split. And you had, certain groups that were radical egalitarians or communists that early. We're talking like 17, 1800s, after the revolution, already trying to say, like Quakers wanting female pastors and trying to gender swap things
Right.
within their community. Like, let's have the men take care of the children and let's have the women run the church and the businesses, because, Protestant Reformation theology. And the more crazy you get with it, you come to these crazy ideas and you try to mix it with socialism and all this other crazy stuff. So that's what this first little paragraph is about, is kind of setting the stage of how we saw the Roman Catholic Church making these errors. The
Mhm.
reformers quite rightly want to split. The Orthodox sympathize with them a lot. A lot of people don't know that the reformers wrote letters back and forth with some of the Greek bishops saying,
Right.
"Hey, we're leaving the Roman Catholic Church," and they were very sympathetic. But they were like, "Wait, we're sympathetic. We agree with you about the errors of Rome, but you can't start going off with the five solas and going in this other crazy direction. You're kind of
Yeah.
overreacting the other way." And so they didn't end up unifying with the Orthodox. They ended up creating their own new church, and that immediately led to enlightenment, modernism, progressivism being pushed into the church. And
Correct.
there's good reasons for that. So the thing I'd like to say first before we dig into all this is that it's not, as with most conspiracy theories, or like when you're explaining how things work, it's not this plot where there's these people that get together and go, "Well, we're going to subvert the church and we're going to destroy it." It's not usually like that. It's much more insidious. It's much more sneaky than
Mhm.
that. There are people that have these agendas, but you don't just approach people with a bag of money and they take it usually. Sometimes that happens, but
Yeah.
most of the time it's much more subtle. So the article is going to explain like how this works, how these entities do these things, how they get people on board, how they end up infiltrating, because that's what it's been for the last few hundred years, a slow march through the institutions to subvert them and infect them with modernism, progressivism, and all this enlightenment, crazy theology that we're seeing.
Right. Yeah, I think it would be helpful too to kind of paint the stage. So we're talking about Protestantism here, but this is really something that infected almost the entirety of what like Western Christianity. I mean, you see the Roman
Yep,
Catholic
yep,
Church, the current state of the Roman Catholic Church is abysmal. I posted an article today where they're making documentaries. Now, I'm not saying the figure is correct, but these are citations by priests, these are citations by clergy within the Roman Catholic Church that say that up to 80% of them are Skittles, the clergy,
yep, yep,
and saying
yep,
that the culture within the church is pretty openly Skittles leaning. So,
yes,
you see the state of the Roman Catholic Church. You see the state of the different Protestant denominations, like you mentioned, the Methodists. There's a Methodist church, maybe 30 minutes away from me, that does drag queen sermons. It's
yep,
absolutely insane what's going on in the Protestant church,
yeah,
Protestant churches, I guess. But
yeah,
the core thing here to think about is this doesn't just happen because of incompetence. This
right,
is this is something that like you said, is a little more insidious. One tie, I know we're going to get into NGOs, it's like a big picture piece. Typically, it is more than one external group applying pressure to make these changes happen. Sometimes you can tie it to an NGO. Sometimes you could tie it to maybe a government organization. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes it has to do with the influence, especially during the time of America's formation. The influence of Masonry was
Yep.
a huge deal, especially when the Protestant churches came over to America. Our first president was a Freemason. He was a member of the Episcopal Church. I talk about this quite often on the show. And if you were ever to read the document, the Alta Vendita, it talks about the dissemination of Enlightenment principles and liberal axioms. So this was kind of like a match made in heaven.
Yeah.
In the well, maybe not heaven, but you get what I'm saying. This
Yeah.
is kind of like this is the ultimate kind of boiling pot for subversion in the West. And again, the Alta Vendita is a Freemasonic text that talks about subversion of the Roman Catholic Church, but it's multiple different external pressures that end up in these dramatic results. This isn't just the result of maybe they're incompetent or something. No, these people are very competent and they have an agenda. So
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and this people think this is new. They think it's like a post 1960s sexual revolution type of a thing or something like
right,
that. And this goes back way further than that. That's why I usually start with Protestantism and the Enlightenment. Although you could go back before that and look at the medieval Roman Church and see a lot of this crazy stuff. Like Jay talks often about the hysterical, female saints and a lot of the crazy stuff they were doing. And it the liberalism stuff tends to follow degeneracy. So whenever there's like degeneracy creeping in, when you've got, priests who are being paid off, or you've got the German princes and their influence on the Roman church and how they had like, secret orgies and tunnels that went under the church and when you get this kind of debauchery going on, and you want to try to mix it in with the church. Why do you want to do that? Well, because the church is extremely powerful and influential, and it has the monopoly on morality. So if you want to not be getting, you know, tarred and feathered or chased with pitchforks or, hung in the town square because the people find out that you're doing this crazy stuff, you want the degenerate things you're doing to be looked at as, oh, there's a moral argument to be made that it's not so bad and it's actually not that sinful and it's really okay. And so you kind of have to try to figure out how you're going to push these justifications into the church and into moral teachings of the church. So people who are in power, when you have everything, when you have tons of money, especially if you're multi-generational wealthy, there's not a lot of thrill in life for you. It's not like us poors where we get one good dinner and a really nice drink out with the wife, and it's like, man, this is the life. This things are great. You get really excited about, the concert you're going to go to or the football game you get to go to this weekend. It's like what gets you through your work week. We can get a lot of thrill from some pretty basic stuff in life, things that are, small. It's the little things; those are exciting for us. But when you're born into a world where you have everything, you have every luxury and every comfort. The reason I think the elites and those kinds of people throughout history have always turned to degeneracy is because they're bored. They have everything they want. There's no thrill left in life. So they either want to conquer and go to war, or they want to do debaucherous, degenerate things because that's where you get the excitement. That's why a lot of them are very into things like the occult, because it's like, well, I have all the power that this physical realm offers. Maybe I can get, supernatural powers to go along with it. Maybe I can, make someone fall in love with me that I want. It's like, you know what I mean? It goes beyond like being able to have everything. So I think psychologically that could be an explanation for why these people always tend to be degenerates and fall into the most disgusting, and awful, filthy behaviors. And then if you're in power in this age, it's not so much the case anymore that you need this, although you're seeing a lot of pushback now. This whole separation of church and state thing, I think a lot of that was motivated by the same stuff. Why do I say that? Because the feminists that I read, like Matilda Joslyn Gage, wrote a book called Woman, Church, and State, where it's a huge polemic of her saying, look, women should be able to have abortions and do degenerate sex and do whatever the men do. And the only reason that's not allowed is because men throughout history have used the church and the state to oppress women and put boots on their necks because they want us to be nice little kitchen sex slaves. And there's nothing in the Bible, and there's no rational reason to believe that women can't be promiscuous and have abortions and take multiple husbands if they want to, and everything else. It's always, when you boil it down, this is the pattern that I see. People want to do degenerate stuff. They don't want to end up in big trouble for doing the degenerate stuff, which is not permitted by a moral Christian society. So they have to make an argument for why it's actually good. And actually, the church either condones it or forget about what the church says about it, because the church and the state should be separate and the state makes the laws. And from this secular humanist worldview, what do we always see? The famous Andrew Wilson versus Matt Dillahunty, or even, Jay and Matt Dillahunty. It always comes down to, well, who are you to tell me I can't put the pee pee in the poo poo?
Right.
You can't
Right.
you can't prove that God exists, and you can't prove to me that it's wrong, and I'm not hurting anyone, so why can't I do this? So fundamentally, that's what was going on here. And that's what's been going on. And even with, like I say here in the article, with Vatican II, where we see the like official liberalization of the Roman Church, condoning socialism, world socialism, borderless world, the Skittle stuff starts creeping in. Muslims worship the same God, all this sort of stuff, right? It becomes this liberalized, universalized, perennialist type of a church. And Rome, 1,000 years ago, was nowhere near that. If you look at Vatican I, there's no way you can reconcile it with Vatican II in this
Right.
way.
Right.
So you have to ask yourself, like, what happened? Why the huge radical flip? Why in a couple hundred years did things flip so much in the West, in both Rome and in the Protestant churches? And so we have to talk about how wealthy special interests, certain individuals, and then more broad organizations and government organizations and non-government organizations, how they all kind of wanted to push toward this liberal new world order, and the kind of plan that they had for doing that.
Yeah, and I think it's key that you brought up earlier the separation of church and state. I was discussing the Alta Vendita just a moment ago. That's actually one of the one of the principles that they wanted to push forth to subvert the Roman Catholic Church. And why do they want the liberalization of the Roman Catholic Church? Why do they want the liberalization of the Protestant denominations? Why do they want to ultimately, and by they I mean these external powers, not just Freemasonry in this case, but
Right.
these external powers. Why do they desire this liberalization? Yeah, it is also driven by maybe their own personal vices, so on and so forth. But also, people that are engaging in this type of degeneracy don't tend to be pretty high T, fighting against evil type people. They're more easy to control. They're a little more
Yeah.
docile. They're a little
Yeah.
more flimsy. I mean, look at the state of the Roman Catholic Church when they had the papal states, right? Look at the state of the church of the Roman Catholic Church then. I mean, it was a powerful force in the West that had to be broken down somehow. That
Hmm.
was that seems to be part of the goal. It had to be broken down somehow. And an easy way to break down a large institution is to corrupt its moral values. Because once
Yes.
you do that, you start to make it a little more liberalized. Well, oh, you know what? I can kind of empathize with the people who say that the church is oppressive because we have too much power. And don't you see we have all this gold, and we have all this these paintings and these, and so on and so forth. It's too much. We
Yeah.
should do something about this. You start to have these ideas creep in, and then you're almost kind of getting to the point of where we're at in the West right now, of like suicidal empathy. It's like,
Yes.
well, let's now support our enemies over, our brothers and sisters. Let's now welcome them in, give literally everything away, give up all of the power, give up all of our morals, by the way, and just go from there. And that's kind of what you see happening in the Roman Catholic Church as far as their morals go, though they're still making a lot of money off of our government.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, that was the argument from all the first wave suffragists as well. It was
mhm,
this taking an ahistorical view of things. So all of liberalism, but especially feminism, relies on framing history in a certain way that it never really happened. And what do you hear about the church from well-minded libertarian Americans, like the freedom and individualism type of patriot Americans, like even a lot of the MAGA folks fall into this category where they're like, well, you can't go to, I don't go to a church. It's just me and my Bible.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
me and my Bible because churches are corrupt and churches are powerful. And, you can't, I'm not going to listen to no authority tell me. Why do I need the church to tell me what Jesus said? I've got the book right here in my hand and it tells me, like an IKEA manual, everything that I need to know about Jesus.
Mhm.
And it relies on this historic framing that says that everywhere there was a church, there was abuse of authority and corruption, that authority is the problem, that government's the problem, organized religion. How many times have you heard somebody say, I'm Christian and I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, right? I don't like
Right.
organized religion. I love Jesus, but I don't like organized religion. And to be fair to them, on the one hand, they would read my article about NGOs and infiltration and how that works, and they'd say, see, this is what I mean. But that does not mean that the institution or having institutions or having normative authority is the problem. That's
Right.
not the problem. And
Mhm.
we can see, like, with the Orthodox Church, we're kind of the last stand. We're kind of the last bastion of sanity in the world. We're the one church that hasn't been completely captured yet, but they're working on it. And that's why I wrote this article, because I could see the people starting and trying. Now, I was still a catechumen when I wrote this, and I asked multiple clergy, my priest, um, and my priest checked with the bishop, and then I ran it past Father Deacon Ananias and a couple other people first before publishing it to make sure I'm not overstepping or anything like that. But it's not like I'm teaching theology here. I'm not doing any of that. It was just me and the background I had in research on these kinds of things,
Right.
noticing, holy cow, this really this is how they get the churches. This is how they subvert the churches, and this is what they're trying to do right now. Because I looked into, Sarah Riccardi Schwartz and some of these people that were behind this article, this ridiculous article about Abbott Trefon, and I'm like, how can they just lie like this? Because I know that this woman is not stupid enough to believe that Abbott Trefon posing with a prop gun in a
Yeah.
speakeasy where we're pretend, look at us, we're 1920s gangsters. She knows darn well that that is not proof that we are a bunch of right-wing NAZIs and all this other stuff. But she doesn't care. She's going to take the opportunity anyway. Why? What's her motivation? And I knew about her background, having infiltrated an Appalachian church and convincing the
Mhm.
parish that she was one of them for like over a year so that she could write a hit piece and misrepresent things that were going on in a ROCOR church and push this narrative that all ROCOR churches are Russian spy people and were right-wing extremists and violent people. So I was like, let's look into this. Let's look into her. So, of course, I dig in and find out that her whole academic background is typical of what I find when I'm looking at people who are influential figures in institutional capture. And this would be, you can look at the CIA, you can look at the feminist movement, you can look at all the heroes of the LGBT movement, all the heroes of the civil rights movement. A lot of people know now that Martin Luther King Jr. was working for, various three-letter
Right.
agencies, things like that. It's almost always the case. Whenever you see a social revolution,
Mhm.
it's almost never grassroots. It's almost never just the people looked around and realized they were oppressed and they had to rise up and fight for their rights. It's never that. There's always a university, an NGO, some kind of organizational push behind it. And what they do is like what happened in the case of Sarah Riccardi Schwartz. They go to a university. Universities are great for this. And who really started this, who spearheaded this as an idea, was the Bolsheviks. My second book is going to be a lot about this. The Bolsheviks, in the late 1800s in Russia, realized that they needed to radicalize larger portions of the population if they wanted to have a communist revolution in Russia. It was a pretty tough thing. Russia was pretty religious and it was quite traditional, and it was much more old world and unaffected by liberalism at that point than the West was, for sure. So they actually worked with a lot of people in the West. They worked with a lot of Fabian socialists, and people like that in Western universities. So they go from Russia and be trained in universities in Germany, England, France, Italy, working with socialists, communists, people who had already had experience through things like the legacy of the French and American revolutions, these previous revolutions that they'd had, and taught them how to radicalize through universities. So the first thing they did was start offering scholarships to young women and pushing propaganda to get young women into universities. And see if this sounds familiar, you guys, to what's happening
Right.
right now with demonstrations against ICE and things like this that we have going on in our country. You see women all of a sudden at the forefront. You see women picking fights with cops, bombing places, doing acts of terrorism in the name of the revolution or in the name of overthrowing this oppressive authoritarian regime that they believe is trampling on the people's rights or whatever. So the Bolsheviks did this, and they got women into universities in large numbers. They would give them scholarships or free rides, and they'd say, "This is a great thing to do while you're looking for a husband. You can go to university, and then by the time you graduate, hopefully you can get a husband, and then you know have a family." Because they, at that point in time, the women weren't like clamoring to be boss babes yet, so this was the way they kind of framed it, as like, oh, go to university and get an
Right.
education, you can find a husband. And they would radicalize them once they were there and use them for things just like what they're doing right now. When you see these fat white liberal women trying to beat the crap out of ICE agents, and you're like, what on earth? Why would they do this? It's so crazy. It's because they go to universities and they get radicalized, and they're told that it's incumbent upon them to be in the front lines of the revolution. Why? Because the ICE agent doesn't want to shoot the lady in the face. They don't want to punch women in the face. They don't
Right.
want to throw tear gas at them and take them. Now they'll have to when they're forced to, but look what even happens. Look what you can hit a guy with a car and half the country is going to go, "That wasn't nice to do to the lady. Sure,
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
hit you with the car, but that was a girl. How could you do that to a girl?" So it's very useful to push women to the front of these things. So
Mhm.
they'll find female college students like a Sarah Riccardi Schwartz who tends to have like maybe a left bias. The professors will notice when you enter into like your master's program and you're writing your master's thesis, you get chosen. If you've ever been through a master's or a PhD program, you kind of get picked for certain things, and they have to approve of your thesis, and then they help you with writing it, and then they'll critique it and all this sort of thing. This is a very good way to find out, okay, who is easy to radicalize, who already kind of has this revolutionary left-leaning bent, who has good ideas about where to push things. And what they'll do is they'll take those people, and I describe this in the article, and they will give them certain leadership positions upon graduating. So the Luce Foundation, the Henry Luce Foundation, Henry Luce was the founder of Time Magazine and Life Magazine and several other really influential American. He had a huge American media empire in the first half of the 20th century. He had tons of CIA connections, extremely powerful man, had lots of wealthy connections in places like China, super influential guy. And he
Mhm.
wrote his own op-eds about Americanism and wanting to push Americanism abroad and the new American century. If you guys know about PNAC or some of these organizations, these were the precursors to those things. And he and his wife engaged in espionage, all kinds of crazy stuff going on there that you can read about in the article. But what they would do is they would have scholarship funds, and then they would have like they would invent positions within institutions. So,
Right.
okay, we have this NGO, we have the Luce Foundation, and the Luce Foundation's stated goal is to spread democracy and freedom for. It's always something very altruistic. You'll never go to an NGO's about page and hear them say, "We want to sterilize women and knock the population down by about 50%." They
Yeah.
don't say that. So they have to phrase it in a way that sounds very altruistic and very
Mhm.
innocent. It'll be something like, "We are caring for the health of women and girls, and we want to give them opportunities. Therefore, we go into Africa or India and we promote vaccine programs. We do Planned Parenthood type organizations there. We give everyone birth control. We there's besides just Planned Parenthood, there's another one called the Marie Stopes International, which is responsible for a massive amount of abortions in the third world. And this was a British agency, an NGO that was pushed into these places to promote abortion. So, but they don't say that. They don't say we want to bring down the population of India by quite a bit. So we're going to move in here and give them all access to
Right.
birth control and abortion. They say, you know, we want to care for the health of women and girls. We want to promote opportunity. We want to lift people out of poverty. And I'm not saying that there's not some good things that some of these NGOs do. Sure, there is. There's also a lot of fuckery that goes on. And a lot, like for instance, if you look into NGOs that are supposed to stop human trafficking, you will be mind blown. I have another piece about this on my Substack too. The ones that say they're there to end human trafficking are almost always the
Yes.
people involved in those NGOs are the ones that get busted for
Mm.
human trafficking.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, like, we're gonna an NGO that says, "We're gonna protect children from predators. We're here to protect the community and protect children from sexual abuse." Almost always, those are the people that end up getting arrested and convicted of doing the very thing they say that they're saving everybody from. It's just another very noticeable pattern that you can look up and that I've documented on my Substack. So this is what happened with the churches. They wanted to liberalize it, and in my book I even talk about like the Rockefellers and some of the other big industrial families that they saw this as good stuff. They're not like nefarious people that necessarily want suffering. They just think they know better, so they're like, well, we don't like suffering, and these stupid, you know, Christians and these traditionalists, they don't understand what's happening. We know that if we just brought the population down a lot, that this would help with suffering. Or if we sterilized, you know, like the Rockefellers had the Bureau for Social Hygiene, which was the precursor to the NAZI program to sterilize anybody that had bad eyesight, had Down syndrome, had any sort of mild disability, any sort of mild cognitive impairment. We got to sterilize you. We can't, we don't want that passing around, you know. So they were
Yeah.
all eugenicists, but they did it in the name of something good. It's social hygiene, because when you say eugenics or you say we're going to sterilize, you know, people who need glasses, so that we'll end up with a better quality race that doesn't, of people who don't need glasses, people go, that's nuts. That sounds awful. You shouldn't do that. So they always have to present it in a much more altruistic light. And the Luce Foundation's stated goal was basically to push this American liberalism into all the institutions, especially into churches. And they did that through these programs where, say, you graduate with a master's in theology and they see either, oh, this person has a master's in theology, but they tend to have homosexual proclivities. Rumors are that they
Right.
have a boyfriend. This person is going to be really easy to leverage, and he already has a personal interest in making this more acceptable. So we're going to make sure that he gets a good job within an institution where he has power and influence, and we're going to encourage and push him to push this agenda. So, like I said, it's a little more sneaky. It's not like they approach the guy with a bag of money and say, "Make the church gay." It's
Yeah.
more like you know, we love your master's thesis, and we really sympathize with what you're trying to say here. And we, like you, believe that LGBT Americans should have a voice in the church. Don't you think so? And gay Bob, the pastor, goes, yeah, I do think so. I think, you know, I think it's really terrible that I can't be a pastor just because I have a secret boyfriend. I don't think that that's fair because it's 1950 or whatever. And so they'll say, well, what about this? What if we give you a position within our NGO where you know, you are in charge of who gets donations? So all these churches that need donations, they need state grants, they're applying for grant money through the NGO. You can go and vet them, and you know, the ones that you think are going to be most helpful in making sure that LGBT Americans have churches to go to, you can offer funds to those. You can give priority to them. You know what I mean? So it sounds really nice. And I think these people are very good at convincing themselves that what they're doing is good and that they're serving a just cause. Of course, we would look at it and say that's not the case, that they should be submitting to the teachings of the church, that they should not be taking it upon themselves to decide that the church needs to do this or change that. But this is how they do it, essentially.
Right. And what you said about them approaching the education system and trying to go through the seminaries and go through the colleges is absolutely correct. We see a lot of these grants from these liberal leaning NGOs, these liberal leaning organizations coming through the seminaries. We were talking about the Episcopal Church not that long ago. Well, that's one of the ways they got a foot in the door. The Masons at the time got a foot in the door. Well, they funded one of their main seminaries. And guess what happened shortly afterwards? They started to disseminate these liberal axioms and Enlightenment ideas. One of their main seminaries is actually built right next to the George Washington Freemasonic Monument. So you do see these groups and NGOs and other, even secret societies funding seminaries to try to push some of these ideas. And you see this within the Roman Catholic Church. It's become rampant. I mean, there was the huge scandal not that long ago where the United States was giving the Roman Catholic Church millions upon millions of dollars to fund migration. And it's still going on today. And a lot of that money was actually going towards human trafficking. This came out in the USAID scandal. And more was actually, we reported on more of this funding not that long ago on the stream that I did with Orthodox Luigi, where we're talking about the Lutheran NGO that gets $2,700 per Somali. Well, the Roman Catholic Church is participating in that. And you know
Yeah.
what ends up happening in these seminaries once you have these liberal NGOs and other groups flooding them with money to disseminate these ideas? The culture of the seminary changes as well. And the teachings that they disseminate from there end up becoming more and more corrupt. And I'll show one example here on the screen here. This was from the time of Francis, but this was a pretty big story back then. There were Skittles clubs run in seminaries. The former Pope Benedict wrote a entire book, kind of breaking down what he had noticed during his pontificate, and he published it posthumously. So after he passed away,
Mhm.
talking about literal gay clubs run in these seminaries. Well, how do you get like that? Is it just because they're asleep at the wheel or something? No, it's because
Right.
people are flooding money into the seminaries because they're saying, we need funding, we need funding. Well, who's going to give us funding? Well, the people that want to influence what you're teaching. Why
Yes.
else do
Yeah.
you fund a seminary? Why else do you fund a college? Right? You want to influence what's being taught. And that's
Right.
how you influence the next generation of teachers within the church. That's how you influence the next generation of teachers in society as a whole. So we see
Yeah.
this within the Roman Catholic Church. We see this within the Protestant churches. And we're beginning to see this now to a lesser degree, I'll bet. They're trying to do this to Orthodox churches. So,
Yes. Yeah, and a little snippet from my from my article here, which explains this. Upon Henry Luce's death in 1967, the Luce Foundation became the major beneficiary of his estate. In 1968, the Luce Professorship Program was created with the intention of placing academics loyal to the progressive cause in positions of power and influence in academia. Over 3 decades, the program placed 72 new faculty appointees at more than 50 colleges and universities around the country. By 2005, the foundation was ready to launch the Henry R. Luce Initiative on Religion and International Affairs. This initiative was aimed at policymakers and scholars who informed them in order to influence domestic and foreign policy decisions. Over the 16 years it was operating, the initiative awarded more than $60 million in grant money to academic, public policy, and media organizations. The initiative supported projects focused on the role of religion, environment and sustainability, political economy and development, geopolitics, health and education, gender, race and sexuality, law and human rights, social movements, migration, and humanitarianism. And that's from their website because they love to brag about what they've been able to accomplish. So they'll tell you. They'll say, oh, we gave more than $60 million in grant money over the course of 16 years to all these things. And Columbia University was awarded one of these grants to create their Center for Democracy, Toleration, and Religion, or the CDTR, which seeks to wedge feminist, LGBT, and other progressive ideologies into acceptance in tradition religions such as Orthodox Christianity, traditional Catholicism, and Islam. So they have a specific department that they
right,
established for this express purpose, and they literally tell you that. We created the Center for Democracy, Toleration, and Religion to wedge feminist, LGBT, and progressive ideologies into traditional religions. And that is where Sarah Riccardi Schwartz and a lot of other media people from Fordham ended up. They get recruited from wherever university they're at, and they say, we'd love you to be part of this, and they offer you a job and they give you money, and they say, this is the goal, and we think that what you've already been writing about and doing really fits the goal, and you'd be a great fit for us. And so of course they happily accept, and this is what they do. There's one more really important program, which is the Henry Luce III Fellows in Theology program. This one says that among the goals of the program are to foster interreligious dialogue and prepare future American Christian leaders for America's growing religious diversity. Barbara Rossing, professor of the New Testament at the Lutheran School of Theology at Chicago, used the Luce Fellowship to conduct research on the relationship between global warming and current religious notions of the apocalypse. Luce theology fellow Douglas Burton Christie's contemplative ecology project applied those teachings of early Christian monastic traditions to modern ecological problems. And they have a whole little paragraph here bragging to you about what they do. And this guy, in his paper celebrating 75 years of this influence, said, one distinguishing component of the Luce Theology Fellowships is the requirement that fellows make their scholarship accessible to broader audiences.
Yeah, you got to be
This
inclusive.
This focus on dissemination has yielded impressive results. Fellows have produced more than 100 books to date, and many have published articles in scholarly journals, church publications, and national magazines. Fellows have also become important voices in the media, writing blogs and giving radio and television interviews that provide scholarly religious perspective on a range of pressing contemporary issues. In other words, this foundation uses its tremendous resources to influence religion and policymaking, as well as a public opinion on these topics, just as Luce's magazines did in cooperating with the CIA for 80 years. So it's really pretty simple. It's pretty genius. It's pretty smart, and it really, really works. And for all the people who sit there wondering, how the hell did we get here? How did we get to a place where there's angry lesbians fighting ICE in the streets to protect Somalian, creepers who are taking millions of dollars of taxpayer money for daycares that don't exist? Like, what kind of crazy timeline am I in, and how did I get here? What the hell? This is how they have done it over the
Yeah.
course of the last century or so, by taking over the institutions. And like, if you watch Dr. David Patrick Harry, the reason he is doing YouTube and the reason he's doing what he's doing is because when he was partway through his PhD program, he realized they're never going to give me a job because I won't toe this line. He was going to UC Berkeley, and he realized, like, one of his idols, like, not idols, but one of his, like, people he really looked up to in academia got Me
Right.
Too'd. He got Me Too'd in the most ridiculous way, had been tenured for decades, and was this, like, really well-known, well-published academic, got totally shit canned for practically nothing. And Patrick was like, well, this doesn't bode well for me and my beliefs and the things that I say or the things I want to teach. I'm never going to get accepted in academia. So he decided doing YouTube and building a community that way and trying to counteract the liberal influence that way was going to be a better route, because what else can you do?
Right. Yeah. Well, that, like you were saying, that is an ingenious method to subvert these religious institutions, because think about an institution like Roman Catholicism that has a massive priest shortage. Well, these priests got to go to seminary. Well, how are
Yep.
they going to be able to afford seminary? Oh, well, you got to apply for one of these scholarships from a major foundation. Well, what are the requirements according to what you literally just read? Well,
Yeah.
you got to be a little inclusive, right? You got to use this inclusive language. We were talking about this 2 nights ago on my stream with Father Stephen DeYoung, and he was saying that when he writes for any kind of academic paper, academic book, he wants to get published in an article, so on and so forth, he has to use this kind of like tiptoey language. He was like, at one point, he had to use language that was like, in order just to get published, it was like, organism of the female species or something. Like, it was like ridiculous, some term he had to use. And I was like, oh, well, you know what, I guess I'm a little bit of an academic myself, since I say Skittles all the time on the stream now. So no, but I mean, you get the point though. In order to get any kind of traction in any of these publications, in order to get any kind of traction in as far as applying for scholarships, you've got to kind of kiss the ring a little bit to the woke mob, and then you end up in a culture that is basically like what we just pulled up on the screen not that long ago. You've got these gay clubs in the Roman Catholic seminaries. You've
Yep.
got documentaries being made stating that the numbers are up to about 80% of Roman Catholic clergy being Skittles. Now, who knows if that number is completely accurate, but that's what they're publishing in these
Yeah.
documentaries. And this is by an openly homosexual Roman Catholic priest. And
Yeah.
he's saying, everybody in my inner circle is like this. The culture in the clergy is like this. How does it get like this? Well, you target those people and you offer them scholarships
Yes.
and you end up getting them into your seminaries. They get educated. Guess what? Some of them become teachers, right? If the money is coming from these big foundations, well, who's appointing the teachers, right? So
Yeah.
really, it seems like the best way to combat this was something I actually surprisingly heard on Ancient Faith a little while ago. They were talking about in the Orthodox Church possibly moving away from a seminary system and going back to the way it is done in other countries, which is like a more of a local apprenticeship at your parish. So you become a deacon or something, and then
Yeah.
you study under the priest, and then from there you can be ordained,
Yeah.
rather than being shipped off to one of the what, three seminaries we have in America. How many do we have? Not that many.
We've got Jordanville, we've got St. Vlad's, and then what's the other big one? There's one other big one. The name escapes me, but yeah, we have like 3.
Yeah, right.
So
And so it's not that hard for a large organization to try and target and tempt people with funds, especially if
St.
you are
Tecons, yes. Bobby
right.
got it in the chat.
There you go. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's how you get the seminarians like Ethan Wayne and some of these more like company men type figures that are pushing. They're like, oh, Athenagoras was so great. Like the openly Freemason patriarch was so great. We love this. We love, religious indifferentism, so on and so forth. You start to see more people like that infiltrating the culture of the seminaries. Now, luckily, currently where we're at right now, they don't like that either. The culture has not been completely subverted. We are the last bastion, it seems, as far as any kind of tradition within Christianity. It's right here in Orthodoxy. Roman Catholicism completely sank at this point, just about, especially in
Yeah.
academia. Protestantism, you go to any Protestant university, it is broke central. You might as well be living like in the COVID era, as far as what you could talk about. It's pretty
Yep.
bad.
Yeah, there's another little bit here. So if you want to know how there's a few characters within Orthodoxy from Fordham who have been doing this sort of stuff. And they were the same people that during COVID pushed all the lockdown narrative stuff. But one of them, her name is Gail Woloshock, and she's openly gay. And she wrote a piece that I mean, she's involved in a lot of different Fordham projects, but one of them, she wrote this article and she said this: we need to consider as the church new questions that were not discussed until recently. In relation to sexuality, this will invite us to ask how far we should go in expecting people to ignore genetic inclinations. Are human beings just about evolution? Reproduction is the only real driver of evolution. Or are we also about relationship and communion? We have articulated a theology to deal with same-sex behavior, or have we articulated a theology to deal with same-sex behaviors? As in science, so in theology, there is much work to be done. Now, you might notice, why is this Orthodox woman who is
Right.
in this influential position in a university talking about evolution? She fully believes evolution. She does genetic science. That's what she does. And she's basically dedicated a lot of her work to trying to search for a gay gene, which they have still never found.
Right.
And a lot of her funding, you can go and get her curricula vitae and find out that most of all her research funding throughout her career has come from like Department of Energy and military related stuff and all kinds of places that it would seem a little bizarre for her to be getting it from. And then here she is at Fordham and they did a whole project. It was like a whole multi-year project with dozens of people to attempt to figure out how we can push the gay stuff into the church. And you probably know a lot of these people. There are certain accounts on Twitter that push this stuff. They're pretty shameless about doing it. Um, but here's this woman pushing, evolution and saying we have to figure out how we're gonna, we can't expect people to. She literally says, how much are we going to ask people to ignore their inclinations? Well, ma'am, have you never heard of the passions? Are
Right.
you not aware of how we deal with the passions, and that, these are not just inclinations. It's like I may have an inclination to do violence. Would it be fair to say, well, just how far should we expect people to ignore their genetic inclinations toward violence? Of course you wouldn't. Of course you wouldn't say such a thing. But for some reason, when it comes to same-sex behavior, as she puts it, we're supposed to believe that, again, based on this enlightenment idea, because she believes in evolution, that it's just part of science and it's just natural, and it's a victimless crime, and so we have to come into the modern era and figure out a way to be inclusive. You look at Sarah Riccardi Schwartz, and this is a little chunk from her website that she took down after I published this. After I published this article, it mysteriously disappeared from her website within a few days. And I said, the same attitude and agenda shows up time and again in Riccardi Schwartz's work, but you don't have to take my word for it. She'll tell you herself right on her website. In describing one of her latest projects, she says, within conservative forms of Christianity, such as Eastern Orthodoxy, women's roles have historically been monitored and minimized, with institutional hierarchs silencing the voices of women and members of the LGBT community. What does it mean to be a progressive female activist in a church that historically refuses to acknowledge her equality? How will conservative Christianity be transformed by women who are leading the way to create a new status quo in the Orthodox Church, one that focuses on inclusivity and intersectionality? This project will reveal how Orthodox feminist activists are pushing back against the hegemony of patriarchal Christianity, seeking not to upend tradition but to transform it, even through socio-religious transgression.
Mhm.
You couldn't be more clear. And this is classic gaslighting. This is people who represent wealthy, influential organizations like the Luce Foundation. They love to tell us that we're imagining a plot to infiltrate the church with far left ideology, while also telling us right in our face that that's exactly what they're doing.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and one interesting thing about this figure, because yeah, it's outrageous what she's saying, but you can kind of trace this to the ties that she has to these institutions and where she publishes her work. So this person is publishing for Public Orthodoxy, the Schwartz person, Sarah Riccardi Schwartz.
mhm.
Now, we just had a recent scandal that was published in the same form by somebody who publishes in the same publication, which was the fake deaconess in training scandal that all the Roman Catholics were sending around. This is one
Yes.
of the same somebody a part of the same group that this woman is a part of, and they get their funding from these large foundations that have ties to three-letter agencies like the CIA. However, in the case of that deaconess in training, she was actually genuinely mentally ill and preaching to an empty church, and the bishop is actually working on that one, which is good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I
Good.
think it's good to call these things out, because then you get the bishops involved, and then they can actually take action. And the good thing about the Orthodox Church is we're not completely subverted, so our bishops actually do take action on a lot of this stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I
it's
mean,
it's
you saw this happen a year ago with Father Moses, when he made a video that women thought was misogynistic, and these same actors, these same people who, again, if you go digging through their Twitter, they will happily be talking amongst themselves about
right,
how they are only in the church for the purpose of subverting it.
right.
I would, for everybody watching, I would not give these people the benefit of the doubt. I have been following them. I have been watching them for years now. Do not give them the benefit of the doubt that they have good intentions but are just misled. No, no, no. If you watch them and you watch how they talk to each other when they don't know that you're looking, they sit there and talk about how they're only in the Orthodox Church because it's the last bastion of patriarchy and we can't have that. So we're going to get in there and we're going to force change. And so what they do, Father Moses releases this video, and it's talking, he's talking about the whatever podcast and how they have the women rate themselves on a 1 to 10, and he's kind of, he's against that, but he's using it as an example in a teachable moment. There was nothing wrong with the video. I thought it was a great video, but these women saw it and they smelled blood in the water, and they started writing letters to bishops and trying to nail poor Father Moses to the wall. And he was like, "What's happening? I don't what's going why are these people doing this? I don't understand." And I was like, "Well, let me fill you in. Let me
Right.
help you understand how this works." They said to each other on Twitter, they're in each other's replies and they're like, the way we do this is we just keep writing letters to bishops. Just write them as though you're 10 different people. Get your friends to write them, get your neighbors to all of us who are in this little group chat, these subversive little chats, we're all going to write the bishops and we're going to say that we feel offended, that we feel scared to go to church, that this is abuse, and we'll basically me too the guy right out of the church. And they were
Right.
bragging about how they had done this to a different priest before, I got my priest kicked out of our whole jurisdiction. He had to go to a completely other thing to continue being a priest. And they were all congratulating each other on it. So there are people, and you see this with, I believe this is all throughout the Protestant church. Like Andrew has debated that gay pastor, I forget his name, and he tells you, I became a pastor basically to destroy the church.
Right.
I want it to be gay, and I want it to be accepting of gays and endorsing gays. We're going to speculate that Jesus was gay because he never had a wife or kid, so he was probably gay. And he pushes it, and he said, if I look at the tenets of Satanism, I believe in every single one of them. He said that. And Andrew said, "Well, then how can you be a Christian pastor?" And he was kind of like, basically, like, "What are you going to do about it? How are you going
Right.
to stop me?"
Exactly.
And in the Protestant church, this is very easy because they don't have an ecclesiastical structure that can deal with it. There's no limits, right? Because it's sola scriptura and the right to private interpretation. So in Protestant churches, a lot of them, unless you're like really high church, but even those churches, I think the last thing I have on my Substack was a theological seminary piece that I wrote and presented at a theological seminary in Russia via video like this, where I believe that in the Lutheran churches now there's certain jurisdictions where it's like 80% of the bishops are women.
Mm.
80%. Like
Right.
there's more female bishops than there are male bishops in large chunks of the Lutheran church now. So those women, and you've seen all the viral videos of them preaching abortion rights and saying abortion is health care, and bragging about how Jesus would love abortions, and you see it and you think these people are crazy. Well, they're not crazy. They just know that the church is supposed to be nice and it's supposed to welcome everyone. And so they take our good nature and they exploit it, and they say, well, you have to let me in. If the
Mhm.
gospel is for everyone, you have to let me in. And if it's faith alone, and you don't need sacraments, and you don't need to do confession, and you don't really need to repent, because the modern evangelical movement does not focus on repentance. It does not focus on battling the passions. It does not have the sacrament of confession. It's just like Jay always does. Come on down to the altar. I'll give you a slice of hot cheese pizza if you say the sinner's prayer. And all you have to do is accept Jesus into your heart, and you're
Yeah.
saved. So there is no repentance. That's why you see these OnlyFans girls coming and going, I'm a Christian now, but I can still do porn because
Right.
Jesus wants me to be happy, and I'm making men happy, and I'm happy, and Jesus wants me to have money, and so here I am. And there's no authority to tell them, no, that's not what you are allowed to do, and you can't do that, and this has to stop immediately. Everyone just goes, well, we just have to pray for her, and it's like they're welcoming this stuff in, but the Orthodox Church is fighting it, which is why there is now a concerted effort by certain bad actors and in
Yep.
certain institutions that they're like, we got to get in there, especially when they see all these articles talking about young men flocking to the church. So what do? When we see young men flocking to the Orthodox Church because young men have been basically ostracized from all of society, they're told they could never be feminine enough, that any hint of masculinity in them is toxic and abusive, that they have to act more like girls. Public schools, especially, will punish boys for being boys. You have to act like a girl. They expect you to sit still and be quiet, and just highlight everything with your different colors of highlighters, and make your little, all the crafty kind of public school stuff that's very girl oriented. It's so feminized, and
Yeah.
80% of public school teachers are women. You go to daycare all day because your mom's at work. You got the daycare lady boss is a woman. It, half of people are being raised by single moms. So young men are looking like And they end up in one of two places. You either go like towards the Andrew Tate red pill stuff, or you go towards orthodoxy.
Right.
That's pretty much your only choices. So they see young men turning more conservative and more traditionalist and going to the Orthodox Church and going, this is something ancient and unchanging that has a standard for morality that's lasted for 2 millennia. It's the sanity and the rock in the storm that young men need desperately and are looking for, because they can't get it in this feminized, insane world where everything is revolves around your feelings. So they're coming to the Orthodox Church in huge numbers. And you can always spot the subversives, because they'll go, well, wait a minute, we don't want that. We don't want that. We don't want them coming here with their right-wing ideologies, and we don't want them coming with their conservative politics thinking that this is a safe haven for that stuff, because it's not. And it's like,
Right.
why would you not want them in the church where they can be pastored
Mhm.
properly? Of course you would. And to immediately say we don't want them because we're worried what their politics might be, lets me know exactly what your priorities are and what you really want to use the church for. You want people coming to the church because you want to liberalize it. So you want
Yeah.
the lesbians coming, and you want the liberal feminist middle-aged white women with money who are going to come and want more help for single moms and more help for gays and all this kind of thing. So they are very worried about it. And my husband has said that he thinks in the next century, because the church in America is growing so quickly, we have to be very prepared for the political fight that's going to come,
Yes.
because there's going to be one. There has to be one. It's as the church gains power and influence in the United States. Right now, we're still only like 2% or something. We're small, but we're growing fast, and it's freaking people out, because all the young men that watch The Crucible and your show and Jay's show and all these, Orthodox apologetic streams and more of the right wing Christian traditionalists, even the ones that are watching like Tim Gordon, who is a trad Catholic, those kind of guys are going to be the political leaders of the next generation. And there's going to be a fight coming. And Andrew feels like the church is very unprepared for that, because we've been such a tiny minority in America.
Mhm.
We don't really know how American politics with the churches and this NGO stuff works. So that's been one of his big focuses, is trying to help prepare clergy and seminaries and stuff for what do we do as we see people rush to the church, so that it doesn't befall the same fate as the other Western churches that have now been totally infiltrated by the institutions.
Yes. And that's why conversations like this, where we educate people on where this money is coming from, where this influence is coming from, the right levers to pull. Because if you don't know what levers to pull, you really can't affect change. But if you know the big actors, if you know who's affecting what,
Mhm.
where they're funding it, where they're sending the money, where the corruption's coming from, then we can actually address it. And this is one big reason, like you said, why they don't want people talking about this, why they're trying to squash the debate bros. They're trying to squash the debate
Yeah.
culture people, because they're the people that are calling this stuff out. And when the stuff gets called out, then the bishops get notified, then the bishops get educated. And then they
Yes.
understand what is actually going on, because maybe, because they're busy. I mean, they're extremely
Yeah.
busy. So they don't
Yeah.
have the time to connect all of these dots. It's not that they're not intelligent, they're extremely intelligent. It's just,
Right.
how do you have the time to go down this rabbit hole to know that Fordham money, right, coming from the CIA is pouring into your, educational system or whatever, influencing seminaries, so on and so forth, to push liberal ideology? They're not sitting there scrolling through Twitter to see the
Right.
Ethan Waynes. They're not sitting there scrolling through, public orthodoxy's blog posts where women are talking about wanting to have deaconesses in the church.
Right.
So this is why people calling this stuff out is so beneficial, and why I haven't shied away from talking about scandals on this channel, because it is extremely important. If we don't want the
Yeah.
Orthodox Church, I mean, I don't think it's going to happen, but we have to put the effort in so that we don't become just like the Roman Catholic Church is now.
Yes.
And you were saying about earlier about them putting people in these positions to be more inclusive. Well, this is what ends up happening in the Roman Catholic Church. And this is what happens in any institution. We're talking about Protestantism, where they, like 80% of the bishops are like women. Now you've got the lesbian Archbishop of Canterbury, so on and so forth. It's inclusive appointments. Well, the Roman Catholic Church is starting to do this as well. We do not want this coming into Orthodoxy. The push has to stop here. The barbarians are at the gates. We have to call it out. if you are telling people to be quiet, if you are pushing back on the people that are doing these debates, if you are pushing back on the people who are out there on a public platform calling this stuff out, well, then you are supporting the barbarians. You are opening the gates for them, and
Yeah.
this is what could end up happening to Orthodoxy if we're not careful. So this was a story I shared not that long ago on Twitter. This is from Info Vaticana, a Roman Catholic source. This was the first female prefect appointed to run a dicastery in the Roman Catholic Church. She was appointed. I reported on this earlier last year. This is Sister Simona Brambilla. So she is the prefect for religious orders, basically. So she's governing over male clergy. She's governing over nuns, monastics, so on and so forth. And this is the theology that she's pushing. God is a woman. The feminist theology of Sister Simona Brambilla. This article here, if you want to check it out, it's over on my X page, basically goes through her endorsement of pagan theological concepts she thinks would be beneficial to interweave into Roman Catholic theology, such as their matriarchal structure, this kind of like feminist nonsense. But this is what happens when you have these NGOs and these other bad actors pouring money into these institutions to make them more and more woke. You get the male priests in these seminaries that are being selected very specifically because they're receiving these scholarships. They want to kind of weed them out by, just like you said earlier, make sure they're inclusive, make sure that they can tiptoe the line, make sure if they want to publish a work in academia, they don't use certain terms or else we're going to reject their paper. All of these things add up. So you have this kind of woke environment in the seminaries. Then you have a woke environment in the clergy. There was a documentary that was released not that long ago. I also posted about on my X page that estimated 80% of Roman Catholic clergy are gay. So you have this massive homosexual culture within the church. And then guess what? Of course, they're going to push to appoint women to be in positions of power over male clergy and monastics and all of this type of stuff. And then what is the first woman prefect teaching? God is a woman. I
Of
mean,
course.
it's so transparent.
Yeah, it's so predictable. And I mean, there's a hater in the chat spurging about me right now, which is expected. It's everywhere. It doesn't bother me. But if people, pushback I always get is like, well, if you're a woman and you believe in patriarchy, why are you here talking about stuff? Shouldn't you be in the kitchen? It's like, first of all, I'm always in the kitchen. Ask everybody in my house. I'm always in the kitchen, cooking, making stuff, baking things. I'm 45. I don't know if a lot of you realize I'm 45 years old. I've lived a whole lifetime before I started doing anything on the internet. My oldest child is a quarter century old. Okay. My youngest child is almost an adult now. So I've done that whole life. I've lived that whole life. I've been with Andrew for 18 years now. And why am I here? Because I know and understand how this stuff works. I see it. I've seen it in my own life, which I talk about all the time. And the problem is that the way things are now, when people like Cleve or Jay or my husband give any pushback on feminism, or Tim Gordon, who's a Roman Catholic, give
Yep.
any pushback on feminism, they get accused of being misogynists,
Yes.
of being, bad guys hating women. Oh, you hate women. You just hate women. And those kind of stupid, baseless accusations just don't hit the same when they throw them at me. So if I contact a priest or a bishop and I say, I wrote this article, I think it might be really helpful for you to know what's going on. They're like, oh, because it's coming from me. Whereas if it comes from, a guy like Andrew, they're like, oh, I heard you're that mean smoking guy that goes on the whatever podcast and
Yeah.
yells at prostitutes. Not true, but if people say it enough, like you said, they don't have time to like dig in and find out all these. They don't have time for that. So
Yeah.
just the fact that I, as a woman, am here saying this does make a difference. I wish it weren't the case. I wish that I lived in and was born into a time where I could just garden and hang out with my cats and be a grandma now that I'm older and my kids are grown up. But that's not the time and place I was born into. And the Lord gives each of us a time and place best suited to our salvation and gives us things we ought to do. My priest wants me here doing this. So for anybody who's concerned, thinks that I'm boss babing or teaching. I have no authority over men. I never teach any theology. If I'm even discussing this sort of thing, I always have a male person with a blessing to teach or talk about these things with me on stream. So the reason I'm here is because sometimes in this day and age, it has to come from a woman so that you don't just get dismissed on the basis of, oh, you're a toxic male who hates women, and we're just going to me too you until you go away type of a thing. So that's why I do it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And that article was spot on. It was good. If you haven't checked it out, I'll include it in the description of this video. It's got a lot of key information. We covered a lot of it today in this video as well. Some of the NGOs named, some of the bad actors named. It is good information to be aware of so that you can see when you see these dumb trends popping around on X, like the, oh, I'm going to be a deaconess, or, you've got like the Phoebe Center
Yep.
trying to push for women deaconesses in the Orthodox Church, and you try to trace some of the funding there. Well, they have ties to public orthodoxy as well. Where is public orthodoxy getting its funding from? Well, a lot of these people are Fordham people. A lot of these
Yep.
people have three-letter agency ties. A lot of these people are getting
Yep.
their funding from the same funding sources that help to liberalize the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, we were
Yep.
talking about this not that long ago on the stream with Jay, and I know Jay talks about this a lot as well. The CIA ties to the Roman Catholic Church in Operation Gladio.
Yep.
What's it? We can. You know what? Let me pause that. I'm going to address some of these super chats, but that would be an interesting pivot point to kind of talk about that a bit. But I want to get to
Okay.
some of these super chats real quick. Straight shot, $5. Why did the Western churches require slow subversion while the Eastern European countries went straight to mass murder? I mean, no offenses. What do you mean by that? You think that people only were killed in the Bolshevik Revolution and not in the West at all? Well, that's just
Yeah.
completely not true. I mean, there are tons and tons of wars and massacres and things that occur in the West. It just so happens to be that one that we're not really taught in schools anymore in the West for a very specific reason is the Bolshevik Revolution. You don't hear about this. Usually they
Right.
will skip over this part of history and move right into something else, or they'll report about this era specifically within the context of United States politics, and they won't actually dive into the persecution of clergy. They won't actually dive into the Soviet anti-religious campaigns, where they literally burned down the vast majority of churches in Russia. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, I did a video on this not that long ago that said, like, atheism kills or something like this, and
Yeah.
the numbers were absolutely staggering. Six-figure numbers of deaths of just Orthodox Christians alone. It was
Yes.
absolutely horrific.
Yeah, my next book is going to cover that. It's going to go really in depth with the Bolsheviks and then transitioning into the Soviet period and communism, and because there's two camps in feminism early on which have now merged into one. There was the liberal Western feminism, which was mostly about women being able to have money and property rights and voting rights, because it's the West. So we care about rights and women should have equal rights. And it was, the whole basis of the West was this egalitarian uh, libertarian ethos. And then you had the East and you had Russia and all the places that kind of fell into communism, and they had Marxist feminism. And Marxist feminism didn't like the liberal feminism because they wanted to abolish property rights. They wanted to get rid of individual rights. They were going the completely opposite direction, yet they found themselves having a lot of the same goals, just for different reasons. And the good thing about this time period is there was no TV or internet, so everybody had to write each other letters. Everybody kept diaries. Everybody wrote pamphlets, books, and political tracts. And we have so much documentation of what the Marxist feminists and the liberal feminists were communicating about, talking about, the plans and the goals that they had and things like that. And they played a very pivotal role in the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, and the mass murder of Orthodox Christians. In fact, the person who orchestrated it was a woman and was a feminist. Her name was Alexandra Kollontai. I'm going to make her famous because almost nobody in the West knows about her. She was extremely influential. She was Lenin's premier top propagandist. She was also like a political liaison for Stalin. She was one of the only Bolsheviks he didn't kill, and nobody could find out why. I found out why.
Mhm.
I'm gonna blow the history wide open, and I'm very excited about it. And I have like all the documentation to prove it. I had to go to Russian sources and get help with translation and stuff like that. But I found out why, and it's gonna blow your mind. And if you want to know how our American universities are filled with Marxist feminists, the same ones that are out in the streets trying to fight ICE ICE
Yeah.
cops and stuff like this, it's because of her. She was the first to make abortion not only legal in any country in the world, but make it free up until birth and paid for by state hospitals. And it got so bad that they had 3 abortions for every 1 live birth within less than 2 decades of her policies being implemented. She was the primary persecutor of the church because she saw it as the major stumbling block to communist progress. She took the Alexander Nevsky Monastery over, robbed them. A priest was shot and killed. She stole church property to give it to the communists. Absolutely horrible. And there were multiple other feminist communists in the Eastern Bloc over the next half century, and their atrocities, no, almost no one's heard of them. Almost none of us in the West know about it. It's very well documented in their sources. Almost nobody knows about it here. So I think it's really, really important. And I'm just like, Lord, give me enough days of my life to finish this book and get it out there, because it's a giant chunk of history that's missing that explains so much about
Mhm.
how we ended up where we are here in the West and why abortion is the leading cause of death worldwide and all these other crazy, insane things that have happened. So stay tuned for the book. It's going to answer a lot of those questions. It's going to blow your mind. It's going to be bigger and better than the first one. Bigger and better. Some say the best book ever.
Nice. Yeah, when you finish that book, I'd love to have you back on to discuss some of the stuff on there and help promote it, because that is extremely key information. There's a reason why in the West we do not see a lot of history from Russia during that time period. It is intentionally covered up. I mean, I was
Yep.
discussing
Yep.
this with and you see this today. You see this today with the Ukraine news. We almost always in the mainstream media only see one narrative pushed. We don't see the UOC churches being destroyed. We don't see the UOC churches being occupied by Ukrainian forces and used as staging grounds. We don't see all of this stuff, but you have to kind of do a little bit of digging. But yeah, I think that's super key information. Feminism is a toxic force used all throughout history, and it is especially impacts the church. We were
Yeah.
discussing head coverings. The reason that some churches don't do head coverings anymore was because of a feminist protest. It was called the Easter Bonnet Rebellion. You hear
Yep.
some of
Yep.
these Protestants will be like, "Oh no, it's because they'll make up something. They'll be like, oh, because of temple prostitutes or something." No, it's because feminists had a bunch of protests. It started
Yep.
in the Roman Catholic Church. The priest denied them communion. They threw a big
Yep.
stink. They said, "Oh, they're persecuting us because we just want to have our hair down and we want to be,
Yep.
we want to be women. We want to be strong. And this big old mean priest is he's oppressing us." And this spreads like wildfire, spreads to Europe, spreads all over the place. And then guess what? Now we have multiple women in multiple different institutions. Basically, head coverings are no longer required, even in the Roman Catholic Church. They changed their canon
Yep.
law over
Yeah.
a feminist protest.
Yes,
Wild.
sir. And at the same time that was going on, the Bolsheviks also started a mass deveiling campaign, not only in Orthodox Russia, but also in like places like Kazakhstan, places where there was a lot of Islam was more dominant that Russia controlled at the time, because they thought that they could subvert Islam and use Islam to help push communism. It did not work out. It did not work out how they wanted at all, but they tried, and they pushed this mass deveiling campaign in both places, and it backfired there. So it didn't work right away, although later attempts did work. But their first couple of attempts were massive failures that backfired. But yes, the whole refusing to wear head coverings, and to me, if it's good enough for the mother of our Lord,
Right.
it's good enough for me. Like every depiction of her, you see her head covered.
Yes.
If it's good enough for her, it's good enough for us. And all of these feminist attacks on this sort of thing are Luciferian satanic attacks. Why? Because who crushed the head of the serpent? Who, through, being the second covenant and being the mother of our Lord, the vessel for his incarnation, crushed the head of the snake, broke the curse of death? And why do we venerate her? Why it does everything in Orthodoxy start with the veneration of the Theotokos? That's why. So
Mhm.
of course throughout all of human history, Satan is going to be attacking real femininity, biblical womanhood, biblical motherhood, pushing the antithesis of everything that the Theotokos stands for, of course. It would be weird if he didn't. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. Yep, absolutely. And that was actually the first attack Satan ever did on humanity, was try to upset the balance of the family. So, I mean, it is basically the basis of the original sin.
It is.
So, chew on that a little bit. All right, let me get back to these super chats for a little bit. Christopher Scott, $5. Thank you so much for supporting the show. And then also, if you have any dono chats on your side, let me know and we can
I don't think I
discuss those.
do. I don't think I do.
Y'all are slacking.
I
Send it.
didn't I didn't plan ahead and I didn't pin the dono chat to my chat or anything. I just thought, oh, I'll just restream it to my channel so people know I'm still alive. I do have plans to revive the channel. I'm working on a huge project right now with Steven Crowder and with Andrew that's going to be coming out soon. You guys are going to love it. All
Nice.
y'all watching this are going to love it. But after that, hopefully I can get around to some of that stuff.
Yeah, there you go. The mods are posting. Send a dono
Oh,
chat. Follow
thank
that
you.
link. Support Rachel. All right, let's see this. Octavian, good to see you. Rachel, thanks for all you do. My wife loves and shares your work.
Well, thank you, Octavian, and thank you to your wife. Tell her I said hello.
He sends another super chat. Rachel, any thoughts? Any thoughts? What plans on womanhood courses, or I guess any thoughts on womanhood courses?
Not womanhood courses. I don't want to sell courses. For one thing, I think it would be very arrogant of me to assume that I am the model of womanhood that everyone should be aspiring to. I often say that I am not. I'm not here because I've always got everything right, or because I everyone should live like me or do what I've done. That's not the case whatsoever. However, what I would love to do, and on my bucket list, if I can find funding to have like a women's finishing school that could replace like a 2-year college degree for Christian women, that teaches all of the stuff that's been lost. All of us women, like my grandmother's an interview with her on my channel. She's turning 100 in April and she's
Wow,
still with
glory to
us.
God.
Yes. She learned from her mother all the basic things, right? How to take care of infants, how to deal with pregnancy, basic midwifery stuff because they lived in a rural area. There wasn't a lot of doctors. She knew how to literally go out back, slaughter a chicken, pluck it, cook it up for dinner. She knew how to garden, how to can things. She knew how to treat a fever for a kid, how to set a bone if a kid broke a bone. All these things that none of us know how to do. Like most of us women who've grown up after like 1980, a lot of us can barely like fry an egg, to be perfectly honest. And I'm saying that as somebody, I had to teach myself how to cook. My mom would give me SpaghettiOs and a can of Pepsi. Okay. I did not get the womanhood wisdom except from my grandma. And I would love to have an alternative for women who are interested in primarily being wives and moms. That's what my girls want to do. And it's really tough these days because it's not like most of them are going to get married at 18.
Mhm.
Maybe, hopefully, in the future, we will go back to getting married younger. Hopefully, we will do that. But it's like, what do young girls do right now between 18 when they graduate from high school and the average age of 30 when they get married now? Which that's insane. Don't wait till you're
Yeah,
30. That's crazy. But in some cases, it's hard to avoid because a lot of people don't want to commit. A lot of men don't want to commit young. A lot of men are just bowing out of marriage altogether. Done a million streams on why that is, but I would love to have something. Okay, you're an 18-year-old girl. You don't want to go to college and ride the carousel and get exposed to all the Marxist feminism and all the crazy stuff that's in college. And you
yeah,
don't want to go into debt because you don't want a career. You want a family, but you also don't have a lot of practical homemaking and mothering skills. Where can you learn that? I would love to have like a women's finishing school where you can go and learn early childhood development, basic things like nutrition, home economics. How do you plan a menu for your family for the week? How do you grocery shop and plan that stuff out? How do you raise kids when all of the females in your life are off at work in the office all day and you feel isolated and you're at home alone? Like, I would love to have a resource for women to learn all that stuff and have community and make connections and kind of help the next generation of mothers and wives be great mothers and wives, because I think that's a worthy goal. That's all I ever wanted. I didn't go to college, not because I couldn't. I had a full ride scholarship, but I didn't want to. I just always wanted to have a family. That was first and foremost in my mind. It was greatly discouraged. I was shouted down on it by my parents, my friends. Everyone around me told me I was going to regret it. It was a terrible mistake. I had to go to college. I had to have my own money and a career, blah, 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 blah. So I would love to create something where you go to like a women's finishing school for 2 to 4 years and you learn all the things that are going to help you be a great mom and a great wife, because there's a lot to it. You could easily fill 2 to 4 years with that kind of knowledge and crank
Right.
out some really amazing women who can lead a family, help their parish, have all the skills and things that are necessary to have a large family and manage it well, because that's not easy. It takes a lot of skill and a lot of learning, and I had to kind of do it all from scratch on my own. It was kind of tough. So
That would be a great thing to learn if people were going to public school. Like why don't we teach homemaking in public school? I know James Fishback, the guy that's running for governor in Florida. He QTs my post sometimes. If you're watching this stream, push that as the next policy. Let's do homemaking courses in public school again. We used to
yes,
have that. We used to have something
yeah,
similar,
of
but
course.
it's
Well,
no longer in
I see
existence.
Cool Dude in the chat said it's already over. Women are already in the workplace. That's true. But listen, buddy, let me tell you something about women. Women don't wake up before the sun yearning for the mines, wishing to work. They don't wake up before the sun going, I want to put in a hard day's work today. I can't wait to work. No. Women
Right,
have BS jobs. For the most part, the she economy of female jobs is BS, made up nonsense. It's mostly
right,
HR stuff, office work, they're retail managers. Sure, we have some nurses and some things like that, and that's great. And women have always had those jobs. But it used to be the case that once you got married and had kids, you quit the job. You left the job, and the single unmarried women or the widows or the older ladies who their kids are grown up and moved out, they do the nursing, they do the teacher jobs, whatever. Simone de Beauvoir, the premier second wave feminist philosopher who was so influential, said that we cannot allow women to have the choice to stay home and just be wives and mothers, because if there is such a choice, too many women will choose that. And I believe her. And I think she's right. And I think if you could make it cool again, make it acceptable, because this is a thing that even though it's very LARPy and I have a lot of issues with it, there is a counterculture now that's pushing back on the boss babe feminist stuff. And it's like, I'm going to be at home in my floral dress, making a sourdough starter, and I'm going to vlog about it. Okay, like I said, kind of LARPy, kind of
right.
missing the point a lot of times. I have some issues with it. But if you give women this option, most of them, and I know because I've been doing this for years now and talking to women all around the world, if you tell them, look, you don't have to have a career. You can do this instead. You can marry a good man and you can raise a family and participate in your church parish. They go, really? I can? Oh, thank God, because I did not want to be a dentist. And my parents have been pushing me to go to dental school, and I was going to do it. But I was just like, oh, I don't want to be a dentist, please.
Right.
Really, really, most women are not just like, oh God, I love a 12-hour shift. Give me
Mhm.
a 12-hour shift of hard work. I can't wait. Oh, let me go write my PhD paper. I just love it. Most women are not like that. And if they
Right.
do those things, they're doing the BS frivolous stuff, right? I'm going to write a PhD in gender studies, or I'm going to talk about the impact of the Real Housewives of San Francisco on feminist theory. It's always some nonsense shit. And if you gave them the option to do something like this instead, most of us have the natural inclination that that's what we would choose, and I do believe that. It's 100 years of propaganda and brainwashing. It's women growing up with Taylor Swift, Beyonce, and Kim Kardashian going, well, I guess I have to be sexy and I'm going to have to start an OnlyFans so I can pay for all the plastic surgery so that I look like a blow up doll. And then once I get enough OF money, I have to start a cosmetics company and sell lipstick because that's what the Kardashians do. And women are very monkey see, monkey do that way.
Right.
That's the bad news is that's how we got them like this, but the good news is we can totally propagandize them the other way. And if you give
Yes.
them another option, I'm not saying everyone's going to do it, and I'm not saying it's going to be overnight. This is a multi-generational project and it's going to take time, just like it took 100 years to get us here. But most women, if you give them the option, like, hey, do you want to marry this cool guy who like takes care of you and pays your bills, and all you have to do is be a really good mom to his cute, adorable little babies, and you have baby cuddles, and like, some days you get up at 6 a.m. because the kids are running around the house, and some days you sleep in until noon, and it's a little crazy, it's chaotic, but it's meaningful. You have purpose. They're little adorable people that look like you and your husband. And you can make the sourdough starter, or you can, cook whatever you want. But you have freedom. Like, there's a lot about it that I could make the pitch and sell this to women, like, yeah, I don't have a boss breathing down my neck.
Right.
I have Andrew, and he has expectations for me. He has things that if I just slacked off all day and watched soap operas, he'd be like,
Right.
"Woman, you
Right.
need to get off the couch and get to work."
Yeah.
But it's more like I get to decide what homeschool lessons we're going to do. I get to decide if, okay, we've all been stuck in the house for a week and the weather's been terrible. It's beautiful and sunny out. Let's all go to the zoo. And instead of doing paperwork for homeschool, let's go to the zoo, and each kid can pick their favorite animal from the zoo, go home and do a little report on it and tell me like 5 facts about the animal and da 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 da. You can find your own creative ways to have the life that you want with people you love and care about, that is meaningful, that is busy, and it's full of all kinds of rewards. And you don't have to pay income taxes on it. You don't have to pay some random lady to watch your kids for 8 to 10 hours a day while you go
Yeah.
and, write TPS reports for your boss or whatever. There are so many benefits to it, and it's just been demonized in the media to be like, "Oh, you're a empty-headed bimbo who couldn't hack it in the workforce, and now you're under the thumb of an oppressive man who wants you to be a sex bot." It's like, that's what they think it is, and that's not what it is. And being a stay-at-home mom and homeschooling your kids can be awesome and amazing and wonderful, and there's a lot of women online who are talking about it now. So, there's definitely hope. Don't you be black pilling about that stuff.
Absolutely. And one easy way to help influence, you're talking about, women kind of monkey see, monkey do sometimes. One good thing about that is you can actually influence that at the parish level as well if you veil. Other women will start veiling if you veil as
Yep.
well. You'll
Yep.
notice this. I saw somebody in the chat was saying, "Oh, I go to, such and such parish and nobody veils. Woe is me." Well, you know what? Get your wife to wear a veil, or get your wife to wear a head covering, and then you'll start to see other people wear it as well. Especially as you
Yeah,
start to get more like
the
well
number
known within
one
the community.
the number one DM I get when a woman will DM me, she'll say, "I've been watching your stuff, or all the ortho guys stuff, and I'm gonna go to an Orthodox church Sunday for the first time. Like, what do I need to know? And do I have to wear the veil because I'm afraid I'll be the only one?" It's really just that simple. They're
Yeah.
afraid they'll be the only one. It's the first time they've done it. It seems a little foreign to them, and they don't want to be the only person there doing it.
Yep.
And if other women are doing it, they do it. It's fine. They just don't wanna women aren't built like that, except me, because 'cause I'm very bizarre and weird, but, the Lord has his ways. But for most women, they don't wanna go against the grain and be the lone ranger and the only person doing something different. They want to feel like they're part of the community and like they fit in and like they're accepted and stuff. So, yeah, start wearing your head covering to church, and I have a sneaky way of buying pretty head coverings for women that I know for like
Yeah.
Christmas or whatever. Look at this pretty, here's a beautiful scarf that you can wear to church. And then they're like, "Oh my gosh, I love it." And then they wear it.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
That was
I'm a
one of the things
sneaky
with my wife
subversive
too.
too. I'm a sneaky subversive myself.
Yeah, that was one of the things with my wife too. I was like, "Oh, you know what? Go ahead and go on Amazon, find a couple ones you think are really pretty, and hey,
Yeah.
it works." All right, let's get back into these super chats here. Thank you for the $5 Witsis. No comment though, but thank you so much. I appreciate you supporting the show. JB Pelter Rage. That was earlier when we were talking about the subversive stuff. Use this money for your minoxidil fund. Look, if you want,
Oh,
this is one of the, no, we talk about this all the time. This is one of those things where the sneaky subversives are trying to feminize me because minoxidil lowers your testosterone. You guys are
does it?
trying to, yeah, you guys are trying to make me gay. That's what you're trying to do. So this is one of the sources of the foundation money trying to make conservative figures liberalized. So no, I'm just
That's
kidding.
terrible.
Thanks for
You
the
boy
support,
boys are
Gabrielle.
so mean to each other. I forget that the guy's way of, like, hanging out is to be ruthlessly mean to each other. I have Chase Haggard in my house right now, and Andrew's here, and Rob Knorr was staying here for a few days, and then Steven Crowder was here. And it's like all the men do the whole time is heckle each other about you're gay or you're
Yeah.
ugly or you're fat or something. And they're
That's
having the
right.
best time ever. They're
Yeah.
just like laughing it up, but that's all it is jokes about how the other guys are gay, basically. So
That was like I was texting Ubi Petrus not that long ago, and we're talking about the Elijah Yasi Alex Soren debate, and we said something like I said something like their argument is like hitting a pillow, like there's nothing to like actually dig into or something like that. And he said, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like biting a pillow. I'm like, dude, I don't know about you, I don't bite no pillows like that, bro. So
yeah,
yeah.
Ubi's another one that he's a blue collar guy, and he has some jokes. He has some off color jokes, so I could see him doing that. Yeah.
He's hilarious. I love Ubi.
I do too.
JB, OG communism was the initial trial. It failed horribly. Slow Western subversion was the pivot.
Yeah, it's the Fabian socialist model. It works better. It's like turning up the water, in the pot, and the frog doesn't realize when it starts to boil.
Right. Yep, and there's a reason that there's a reason they don't cover this stuff in the West. It's because the same playbook's being run here, and we have just about the same actors with the same ties to the same historical institutions that are pushing for the same type of stuff that they did back then. So if you really start to dig into it, it becomes very obvious what's going on right now. People that don't know geopolitics, that don't know what happened during the Bolshevik Revolution, that don't know what happened during the Cold War on both sides, and where some of
Yeah.
these ties are, where some of these inroads were made. They are caught completely off guard by what's going on in the various churches and in the various political institutions. For instance, we were going to talk
Yeah.
about this a moment ago, but I guess this would be a good time to kind of segue in. How much time do you have, by the way? Do you have to wrap up soon?
I've got like another 20, 30 minutes, something like that. Be
Cool.
fine.
So I was going to talk a little bit about Gladio. So this is something that Jay talks about quite a bit, but
Yeah.
what is interesting is during the Cold War is when the CIA made inroads, well, at the time OSS made inroads into multiple of these institutions. This is the same time that they made inroads into the Ecumenical Patriarchate, the same time that they made inroads into the Roman Catholic Church, so on and so forth. So Operation Gladio was stay behind units. Post World War II, basically, they wanted to put these stay behind units in these countries to make sure that they wasn't run over by communists.
Yes.
So they would raise up the locals, they train them, so on and so forth. But long story short, the OSS, when they were transitioning over into becoming the CIA, they needed funding. So what they did was they used this Masonic group, the P2 Lodge, as a
Yep.
kind of power broker between the CIA and the Vatican and the mafia, which is a crazy combination, but it's absolutely true. And you can read this in the Operation Gladio book. It was published by somebody who wrote for Wall Street Journal and a couple of other mainstream publications. So this is not a conspiratorial text. This is just geopolitical. This is declassified stuff that we're discussing here. But the OSS made inroads into the Roman Catholic Church, and they brought a lot of baggage with them. You have the same exact individuals making inroads into the Ecumenical Patriarchate. We talked about this with Jay, and it was roughly around the same time. The OSS makes contact to then Patriarch Athenagoras, who, guess what, happened to be a 33rd degree Mason. Okay, they make inroads with him. He says something to the effect of, "I have so many priests, so many." He was the well, he wasn't the patriarch then. He was the archbishop at the time. He says, "I have so many priests, so many bishops. Whatever you need, basically give us the order. We won't ask questions. We'll get it done for you." Oh, well, guess what happens next? The ecumenical patriarch that was there at the time gets deposed. And then guess who's the new ecumenical patriarch? Oh, it's Athenagoras. Surprise, surprise. By some pushing from the OSS. And there was a decent article published by Matthew Namey, if you want to read more into that. That was actually Matthew Namey is a guy that's been on Ancient Faith and things like this. So he's another relatively mainstream name, but you see the same actors kind of pushing in into both organizations. But that's one of the benefits of the Orthodox tradition is we are set up in jurisdictions. So even if one jurisdiction gets compromised by one of these organizations, it doesn't compromise the entire church as a whole. And I think that's one of the reasons that we have kind of become the last bastion. Obviously, that plus the protection of the Holy Spirit, but the
Yeah.
last bastion for Christian conservatism in the world, basically.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I had to let my cat in. If anybody follows me on social media, you know that's Kevin. He's always in my face. He's always up in my business causing trouble, but he was going to scratch and me out the door till I let him in, so now he's in.
Yeah,
But
no
yes,
worries.
this is it's crazy when you start investigating and reading and learning about this kind of stuff. You see intelligence agencies, organized crime, and then either government or church institutions always kind of overlapping and like working with each other. I think it's just because that's how power works, right? You know,
Yes.
like powerful people kind of tend to do that. They work together when it benefits them. They work against each other when they're like beefing over territory, resources, control of whatever. So it's not terribly surprising, but you do see that a lot. You'll see intelligence agencies and the mob like
Yeah.
in with whatever government agencies or sometimes churches and things like that. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. You know what you're starting to notice now, kind of a little bit off topic, is they're doing this big kind of
No
stochastic
kidding.
terrorism push. And you notice they all
Oh,
have the same background. They're all furries, they're all Discord users. Where are they grooming these people, right? They're grooming them on Discord, right? So
yeah.
it's
Well,
it's
it's
an
crazy
interesting time.
because I remember my oldest daughter, who's like in her mid 20s now, telling me back forever ago, what's going on here? Telling me a long time ago, years ago, Mom, be careful about Discord because there's crazy stuff that
Yeah.
goes on in Discord. And I was like, really? Because I didn't really know what it was. This is probably like 10 years ago and it was pretty new. And she was like, "Oh yeah, you got to be careful. There's all kinds of creepers in there, and there's weird stuff that goes on." So I don't know how she knew that because she wasn't supposed to be on that stuff or doing that stuff, but she was pretty clever. So maybe she found a way around the parental controls or something. But like she was talking about her younger siblings. She was like, "Don't let them on Discord. There's crazy stuff that goes on in there." And I was like, "Thanks for the heads up."
Yeah. We would joke back in because I was pretty active on the platform back in the day in more right-wing circles and later on into more religious circles. I ran the largest Protestant Discord server on the platform for a time. It was called
Wow.
Scripture Alone. I ran that with Dr. Reverend Mike. But I remember back when I was in the right wing, kind of like more alt right adjacent servers and things like that, there were feds everywhere. That was kind of the running joke. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, this guy's a fed. Oh, this guy's a fed. Oh, you've got the guy with the furry profile picture. He's a fed. Like he's talking about like, oh, let's take pictures of our guns. Like really dumb stuff. Oh, nice serial number you have there. Really like obvious.
Posting stuff. Yeah, there was a guy on X that I just posted last night. I was like, this is the most Fed posting thing I've ever seen. It's this
Yeah.
guy who supposedly used to be a hedge fund manager and now he's out leading the Patriots and he's like, we need to get out in the streets and clash with these ICE protesters. We need to get out there and get your guns. And he's just totally Fed posting. And I was like, this is who watches people like this and goes, "Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do." Like after Charlottesville and all these other things that we've seen go down, I don't know who still falls for it, but apparently someone somewhere does.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and there were agitators there at the at the quote unquote insurrection. It was all
Yeah.
feds. It was all feds. They show you
Yeah.
what they do. They
Yeah.
infiltrate and they're like, "Oh, aren't you so mad? Aren't you so mad about this thing? What are you going to do about it? Oh, you're not going to do anything about it.
You guys should march on the Capitol.
Yeah, let's go
Do
to
an insurrection. Come
yeah,
on, do it.
yeah. What a mess. Yeah, I
I
mean, but
know.
that's the way that they get. And on platforms like Discord, it's easy to like isolate people and see other kind of schizo, types or whatever. Because you can pick
Yeah.
whatever niche you want to talk about. So if you want to incite right-wing people, you join some kind of right-wing server and you're like, oh, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we like, did ABC 123? Or you join a left-wing server and you're like, "Hello, fellow furries. Do you don't you hate Donald Trump? Well, guess where he's going to be at a rally?" Like these kind of ridiculous stuff.
That's why, like, everybody was calling me because I said that Candace was full of crap with the Charlie Kirk stuff, and everyone's like, "You're a shill for the feds." It's like I literally write stuff about the CIA all the time. Like, what are you talking about? And they're like,
Right.
"That's actually more evidence that you're a Fed."
Yeah.
But I found it not unbelievable. Now we have my position is we got to wait for the trial. There's going to be so much stuff that's going to come out, and it's going to everybody who thinks they know right now exactly what happened is going to find out they don't know shit, because that's what always happens once there's discovery and all the evidence is submitted. Then we'll see what kind of goofy stuff's going on, or what things don't fit, or what things to look into. Then you'll know what to look at. Until then, nobody knows. But I don't find the official narrative to be completely crazy, because there are a lot of nutty left-wing kids on SSRIs that have been on them. Like, this is something I'm finding out now in the last few years.
Yeah.
There are people who've been on SSRIs since they were like 7, and there's a lot of them. They've been on antidepressants, Ritalin, all these different ADHD and anxiety drugs and stuff like that since they were little kids. All the kids that in the early 2000s, oh, little Billy is disruptive in kindergarten because he's a normal 5-year-old boy. Let's put him on a bunch of drugs. And they've always been on it and they've grown up on it. That kid, he has working parents. Both parents are working. So he's on the internet, raises them, and they're in Discord and they're on 4chan and whatever other places
Yeah.
in the shadows of the internet. And they get very radicalized. We should be surprised if that wasn't happening.
Yeah.
It makes total sense that that's happening. It's highly plausible. So I don't find the narrative to be like super unbelievable. I really don't. And if you've ever seen the way that these fruity people talk in a Discord to each other, the text messages between them was, I'm like, I've seen that kind of thing a lot. A lot of the left wingers that Andrew and I started off debating in the early days have gone into the like gay furry-esque type of stuff, and I would sometimes talk, because you want to talk to leftists to find out like what are their arguments and what their beliefs are and where are they going to try to go with things next. So I would talk to some of these people, and that is how they talk, and they are that goofy and they are that weird, and it's like I don't think it's completely out of the realm of possibility, but we'll have to
Yeah.
see what gets presented at trial.
Well, I mean, I don't know if we're going to find out whether or not they were spun up by somebody, but I believe what happens, and we've seen this before with different groups, and this is even something that was done in French Revolution, was done in other places. You take people who are either mentally ill, or maybe they have some kind of bias or something, and then you spin them up and point them in a direction and have them go and kind of like do whatever you want. So
Yeah,
I believe what is going on is, and the reason that you see a lot of the people that are committing these things have the same exact ties. Well, it's Discord and they're all furries, right? Well,
yeah,
it kind of shows to me at least a potential connection of maybe these people were spun up a bit. They were already in these groups, but they're easy to isolate because
yeah,
you're kind of like a social outcast to a degree. So you join these kind of fringe groups, you get the Fed or whatever foreign, it could be foreign agency, it could be, domestic agency, reaches out and says, "Hello, fellow schizo. Well,
yeah,
guess what? Charlie Kirk has a thing. I saw you were posting how angry you were at him. Well, he's got this thing going on. Well, you know what? We're going to let you in on this plan that we're hatching, and he doesn't know he's going to be the fall guy kind of deal." So,
yeah,
um, I mean, you see the same tactic kind of play out, but that would be, if I had to make an educated guess, that would be my guess would be,
yeah,
either three-letter agency, foreign or domestic, spinning up schizos online on Discord.
yeah.
um, but all right, so we have a couple of super chats here, and then we'll wrap up. So,
Okay.
uh, what's this? When's the second book coming out, Rachel?
I don't know for sure because I've got it like 85% done. I've got to just get it fully fleshed out and then put it through editing and all this stuff. All the things I didn't get a chance to do with book number 1, that just I didn't know anyone was going to read it, and I just put it out there and it blew up and I was like, "Oh shit." So we had to revise some things. Like if you look at my early reviews, they're like, "There's typos and stuff," and I'm like, I didn't even have a proofreader, let alone an editor. Naughty kitty. So it's gonna take a while, but I want to get it out this year. I said that last year, but last year I got sick. My dad got sick. We moved across the country. It was pure chaos for all of 2025. So hopefully this year I can actually get it done.
Any homeschool programs you recommend, Rachel?
I have a couple of streams about that on my channel. So if you just go to Rachel Wilson on YouTube, I have a stream about choosing curriculum. It's got some links to stuff that I like and have used. It's got advice on kind of how to choose it for you and for your family. Because I never just did like one curriculum and just like worked through it every day. I feel like school shouldn't be like public school. I think if it feels like public school, you're doing it wrong. It should be um I had 5 kids and they were all very different. They had different strengths, interests, different types of learning that they liked. And we just kind of navigated it pretty organically. Like if something wasn't working here, we would change it. Or like, okay, this one loves reading and writing and is really good at it, but sucks at math. The other one's great at math, but not doing so great with the reading and writing. I'll have them work with each other a little bit. Like we'll do a lesson and then they can help each other, and that worked out really great for us. So I have a whole stream on curriculum on my channel, and then just like a homeschooling 101 that you might find helpful too.
As a young guy, 21 years old, how do you find a submissive Christian woman who wants to stay home and happens to be Orthodox? It's like a needle in a haystack. They are too feminist.
Well, sir, if I had the answer to that question, I would never need to do another stream because I would be rich. But I'm just
There you go.
kidding. I think the honest answer to that question is you got to find somebody who has like the basics are there. She has good bones, but you got to help her out. You got to guide her along. You got to like you're probably not going to find an orthodox submissive woman who wants to stay home. You're
Right.
probably going to have to find a Protestant girl who at least has not been around the block with 30 other guys, hasn't been indoctrinated through university, and she's at least like open to orthodoxy and willing to go with you. And then expose her to maybe some of my content, get her my book, I don't know, or just feel her out and see if she's somebody that will kind of follow you where you want to go, because there are women like that. Still there are still women who, if they find a guy they really like, they're like, okay, well, if my husband wants me to stay home and he has a good reason for that, I'll go along with that. Most of the stories I have heard now that I've been doing this for a while and I've had couples like come talk to me at events or send me emails or things. It's usually like that. Like this guy found a great girl. She was already in college and planning to do something, but she was a good woman, and she wasn't Orthodox, but she was totally willing and interested to go to church. He brought her to church, and now she's been convinced of the fact that it's not a waste of my life to stay home and raise kids. We're about to have our first kid, or we're already on our second kid now. So the reality of it is you're probably going to have to find a girl with good basics that you can kind of train. Not to sound weird, but yeah, you got to kind of train a good wife. Good wives are not born, they're made. It was that way with me, right? Andrew had to help me with certain things, and we grew together and became better wife and husband together. We weren't a great wife and husband when we got together. We had to learn things and figure it out. So I think it's going to be more like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. And I think one piece of advice that I would give you as somebody who's, I was in ministry positions before as a Protestant and kind of have helped young men. It's kind of my background. I used to run a men's mentorship program, would help people kind of get their lives put together, Christians, so on and so forth. But I mean, the things that I would give you advice on if you're looking for someone who's going to make a good wife is first off, just try to find someone who will sometimes apologize when they're wrong. That is a
Y-
good basis because that shows that they have humility. If they're able
Yes.
to do that, they at least respect you enough to be able to follow your lead on some things. Then it's up to you to be the kind of guy that a woman wants to submit to, that wants to follow, that wants to learn from. So if you're not working That's a huge issue. Work on that. If your job stinks, work on that, right? If you're not in shape, work on that. Exercise, right? If you're not doing your prayers and living a very solid Christian life, work on those things, because the more you do that, the more they're going to want to follow you. And then also, one thing that I've learned is that they're more willing to they're more willing to follow what you're teaching, even if it's a difficult teaching, because sometimes you have to have difficult conversations and you can't be afraid to have those difficult conversations. But they're more willing to follow what you're teaching if they know that you're coming from the place of, I'm trying to get us closer to God, or I'm doing this so our family's in a better place, or I'm having this difficult conversation because every time you do ABC 1 2 3, it puts you in a bad spot. And as long as your heart is in the right place and you're showing them that that's the intention behind the difficult correction, and not just, well, I'm lazy, and every time you ask me to take out the trash or something, I'm like playing video games, I'm playing Overwatch, and doing all this other stuff. If you're doing that, then I mean, of course you're kind of undermining your own authority. But when you have the
Yeah.
difficult conversations and it's from a place of wanting to help your family and elevate your wife, then she's going to follow you, and change. One running joke, one running joke that me and my wife say all the time is, if you ever meet like a super conservative woman, it's because her ex-boyfriend made her that way, or So there's a little bit, or her wife, or husband, or current husband, or so on and so forth. But there's a little bit of truth to that. It's a little tongue in cheek, but the, what we're trying to say when we say make that joke is that oftentimes you can influence your wife's views on a lot of different things. When I first met my wife, she wasn't like super, super conservative.
Yeah.
Through my example in education and things like that, she became that way. So
Yeah.
don't
That's
expect to
that's
find.
by far the most common scenario. I was pretty base already when Andrew met me, so he lucked out in that department. Like, at least, I mean, like, our first date was talking about politics all night long. It was so nerdy. But he was like, "You know who the Secretary of Defense is?" I was like, "Yeah, of course I do." And he was like, I've never dated a girl who knows who the Secretary of Defense. Most of them don't know who the president is, let alone anything else. But I was always kind of weird like that, and I had the problem of being I was pretty conservative, to be honest, and I just had bad advice from my parents and people around me. My parents have 5 divorces between them.
Mm,
So don't ask me why I would ever listen to them, but like, who else did I have to listen to? So I picked stupidly and ended up with guys that I was like, how did I get here? So
yeah.
that was my problem. But most of the time, women are not like political, even for they usually only get political if like they've been to college or somebody else influenced them to be political. And yeah, you can totally change a lefty girl. There, Andrew has a whole running joke on it. He calls it, well, I won't say it here, but he says there's a certain thing a man can do that helps make the girl more conservative, and you have to use that power to get her to stop being such a feminist libtard. So I guess, Andrew will give you some advice there. Oh, hi Harry, how's it going?
There you go. Rachel, I'm Harry Ludwig. LOL. Thanks for supporting the show. I got one more super chat
Yeah.
here and then we'll wrap up. I bought multiple copies of your book to give them to others. Can't wait for your next book. Have you read Satanic Feminism by Per Faxneld?
Yes, he is one of the sources cited in my first book. His Satanic Feminism was his PhD thesis, which he then published as a book. I referenced it in my first book. I've actually talked to him a bit on Instagram because he's a really nice guy. He is a Satanist, although he's more of a LARPy Satanist, like most of them are. I don't know that he fully believes in, like, you know what I mean? I don't think he's a theistic Satanist. He loves like European history, and he thinks that all the Luciferian Gothic stuff is really cool. But as a self-proclaimed Luciferian, we talked a bit because he thought it was very interesting that we both came to the same conclusions about feminism coming from opposite worldviews. So we did talk a little bit and had a little bit of correspondence on that. So interesting guy. I appreciated it because I wanted to get permission to cite his work and all that stuff. So yeah, I have read his book. It's big and dense.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there anything that you want to plug before we wrap up here?
Just stay tuned. We have a very exciting project coming out. Andrew and I do with Steven Crowder. And I will be getting the second book out sometime this year. I promise I'm going to do that. You can go to my Substack if you want to read the article we just referenced or many other interesting, cool articles at rwilson.substack.com. You can get my book on Amazon. It's in all the formats now. It's audiobook, ebook, hardcover, paperback. And you can go to my YouTube channel, which is going to be getting some love this year after taking like a full year off. So, Rachel Wilson on YouTube.
Right on. Yeah, make sure to go over and like, subscribe, and if you're watching from her channel, like and subscribe over here.
Yeah,
I this
definitely.
was an awesome stream. When you publish that book, we should definitely do another one to discuss it. I think that'll be cool.
Yes, we should. There's so much. I've been waiting to talk about it because I did all the research stuff over the course of a couple years right after the first one. And it's just so nuts. I thought the first one had some cool stuff in it, but the second one is crazy. So I can't wait to start doing some streams and talking about it as soon as I get it finished. So maybe I'll put you on my editorial list of people to send it to for a proofread and get your feedback on it if you're
Sure.
interested.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Absolutely. Yeah, I'd check it out. So for those watching, a couple things coming up on my show, I'll plug real quick before we wrap up. Stay tuned. On the 19th, Father Peter here is coming on the show. We're going to do a Q&A, inquirer Q&A. So if you're interested in Orthodoxy or you're Orthodox and you want to learn more about it, make sure to tune in for that show. And then another big show on the 26th, Metropolitan Jonah is going to come on the show and talk to the catechumens about feeling spiritually dry, what to do when you're feeling spiritually dry. So that'll be an awesome show. That's going to be a huge one. So make sure to stay tuned. January 26th, Metropolitan Jonah will be on the show. Well, thank you all so much for watching. And thank you again, Rachel, for coming on. Y'all have a good
Yeah,
night.
thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. God bless. See ya.